Welcome back to my series for Steam and Country, reading and commentary. This will be chapter 2B as we go through the book. I hope you'll enjoy this and pick up the series, read along with us, or get the next series as we go through this. If you're watching this and the whole thing's up here complete, that would be great. Last we ended, we were talking. Zara was on her way to Loveridge from her place as she's going to get her inheritance, and we will start now. I awoke to a violent bumping and rattling in the horseless carriage. My head smacked against the metal divider between seats. With a groan, I sat up. The carriage had slowed in its pace, and the engine no longer made the cranking noises of the gears. "What's going on?" I asked. Captain Von Cravat and Mr. Dugearsmith held their attentions fixated on the road in front of them. Judging from the reds and purples in the sky, I'd been asleep for well over an hour. The landscape changed from farmland to thick trees all around us, shading the road and the carriage. The air had cooled since our departure. "Shh," Captain Von Cravat hissed, glaring back at me. "There's Wyranth soldiers ahead." I lowered my voice. Wyranth soldiers? But we're still in Rislandia. Our location I knew from my geography lessons in Plainwoods Road Village. There was no possible way we traveled out of our kingdom in that time. I hadn't attended school in 2 years, but I could still recall Mrs. Everleigh's large map in the back of her classroom. I used to make doodles of our continent and dream of traveling the countryside with my father. Rislandia had such a beautiful shape, almost like a bell. If the Wyranth soldiers had crossed the border here, it would have made an ugly crack right down the middle. "That we are," Mr. Dugearsmith whispered. "Something is amiss to have them this far into our kingdom. Should we turn around?" He tilted his head at Captain Von Cravat. She shook her head. "No, too dangerous to turn the engine back on. They'll hear the sound for certain. I'm lucky I have keen eyesight, or they'd already be on us." I couldn't see any soldiers off in the distance. The night sky had won out over daylight. Shadows fell upon more shadows beneath the sprawling tree branches. I didn't dare doubt Captain Von Cravat's word on the soldiers, however. What should we do? "If they see my uniform, they'll detain us for certain, likely kill us," the captain whispered. She tapped her fingers on the steering wheel in consideration. "I'll leave the carriage. Matthias, if you take the wheel, I'll disappear into the forest and do a little reconnaissance on the Wyranth soldiers in the area. Then I'll meet you in Loveridge, okay?" "I trust your plan implicitly," Mr. Dugearsmith said. He bowed his head to her in deference and motioned for her to move. Captain Von Cravat hopped out of the driver's seat and turned her face to me. You haven't been trained. If they interrogate you, think about your farming for as long as you can hold out. Don't let them know I'm here. It could be life and death. You understand?" I tried to speak, but she had instilled enough fear into me that I couldn't do much but chatter my teeth. I nodded hastily. "Good. Best of luck to you both. See you on the other side," Captain Von Cravat said. She ran for a group of trees to our left and faded into the forest. "She sure makes decisions quickly." I peered into the trees, trying to ascertain where she went, and she's really good at hiding. "Talion is one of the finest officers in Rislandia has ever had," Mr. Dugearsmith agreed. "Now, no more mention of her. I'm going to restart the carriage." Mr. Dugearsmith stood and stepped over the center console to the driver's side, one leg at a time. He settled himself into his seat, bracing his descent with an arm on the steering wheel. With the turn of a key, the horseless carriage engine whirred back on, steam puffing upward into the night air. The carriage nudged forward, bouncing on the rock-filled road through the forest. Within moments, Wyranth soldiers appeared ahead, just as Captain Von Cravat had warned. The soldiers' uniforms were far more ornate than their Rislandian counterparts. The base garments were drab gray, but with a golden belt that wrapped around, forming two snake heads that bit each other at the clasp. Around their necks, metal guards clasped and covered the top buttons of their coats. Their heads stayed protected by hard shells, again with a metal line clasped by snakes, adorned by a golden point. Their uniforms alone inspired awe. But the fact that they stared, shouted, and drew their guns washed away any interest I held in their attire. My heart thundered. No one had ever drawn a gun on me before. I didn't know how to react and forgot how to breathe for several moments. "I can't believe they're being so brazen this far north of the Wyranth border. Where is our army?" "Don't worry, Miss Von Monocle. Follow my lead and let me do the talking," Mr. Dugearsmith said, remaining focused straight ahead of him. The carriage slowed, and we approached the soldiers. One of them stepped to the side and leaned onto the driver's door. A scraggly beard protruded from his chin. It might have been a trick of the light, but his eyes seemed unnaturally dark, pupils fuller than normal. What do we have here? This is quite an expensive vehicle. We may have to commandeer it for the service of the Iron Emperor, the bearded soldier said. One of the other soldiers patted his pistol in his palm as if to lend his companion credence. They wanted to steal the carriage? These soldiers were no better than ruffians. I clenched my fists, but remembered what Captain von Kravat said and bit my tongue. Mr. de Geersmith remained calm and held his hands above his head to show he was no threat. Gentlemen, I would certainly wish to assist with your demands, but please, would you hear me out before taking such an action? The bearded soldier narrowed his eyes. Continue. The third soldier fumbled with a vial which contained a blue, glowing liquid. He popped the stopper, which fell onto the road in front of us. Oh no, the soldier said, bending and running his hand across the ground in front of him to try to find it. Mr. de Geersmith stayed silent while the other soldiers turned to see what was happening with their companion. What did you do, Corporal? The bearded soldier asked, sounded irritated. I lost my ether stopper. It's too dark. I can't see. He sounded alarmed. The soldier, holding the gun, pulled his own vial from a pocket. Here, you can pour your unused ether into mine. The corporal searched the ground a while longer, then returned to his feet. Doesn't seem like there's much of a choice. He tilted his head back and dropped a small amount of liquid from the vial onto his tongue, and then handed his vial to his colleague. The corporal shook. He grinned in an eerie manner as I've ever seen. His eyes had an almost glowing quality to them. Better, he said. The other soldier carefully poured the remaining ether into his own vial and sealed it with a stopper. He held up the vial to show the corporal, then tucked it into his pocket. Mr. de Geersmith gulped. Is something the matter, sirs? The bearded soldier's eyes widened in embarrassment, crossed his face. No, nothing to concern yourself with, Rislandian. Mechanically, he drew his gun and leveled it at Mr. de Geersmith's head. Mr. de Geersmith didn't flinch, didn't breathe, but kept his eyes trained ahead, hands on the steering wheel. The bearded soldier paused in a strange manner as if his entire body shut down and then righted itself. He glanced down the road. I've decided to be lenient with you, considering you have a girl child. You may continue with your vehicle. Remember the Iron Emperor's mercy. Mr. de Geersmith bowed his head and tipped his hat forward towards the bearded soldier. I will, thank you very much. My daughter and I appreciate it. Have a good night, gentlemen. We continued down the road at a slow pace, to be sure not to alarm the soldiers as to anything out of the ordinary. Once we were certain we were no longer within their field of vision, Mr. de Geersmith shifted a lever to increase the carriage's speed. A gun! That soldier pointed a gun at us, I said, hand clutching my chest. The small comfort of reacting to the situation provided me immense relief. Your first time, then? Mr. de Geersmith asked. He didn't appear the least bit flustered. James has accidentally turned his hunting rifle in my direction several times, but that's not the same by any means. I can't say I'd want to have that experience again anytime soon. I hope you won't have to. What was that blue glowing liquid? I asked, turning my head to see behind us. Now, darkness had overtaken the road and forest, but I still feared one of those soldiers jumping from behind us and grabbing me. I don't know. I've never seen anything like it before. The person I'd ask about such things under ordinary circumstances would be your father. He's seen so many wonders far and wide, Mr. de Geersmith said. We'll have to report this to King Malachy. Could be crucial intelligence. But how are we going to get all the way to the capital, especially with those soldiers guarding the road back? Wait and see, Miss Von Monocle. Wait and see. All right, looks like there's actually a third part to this chapter where the scene ends. So we'll stop here in the interest of time. Pretty long chapter. I really want to set the stage, what was going on in the world of Rislandia with the Wyranth coming across the border. In the first chapter, when the earth shook, we saw a strange airship overhead. And this one, we actually see that there are Wyranth in between the town of Loveridge and Plains Road Village, which is disconcerting for the Rislandian population. I put that Rislandia is shaped like a bell. It's not exactly shaped like a bell in the map. It's more of a it's more of a shape like Spain, I guess. And I mentioned having a crack going up the middle. That's obviously a reference to the Liberty Bell. I just wanted to throw some of our history in there. The Wyranth serum that they're taking ends up being a very important part of the book. This is sort of some foreshadowing and setting the stage for the big conflict to come towards the end of the book. All these little details add up, and some of this stuff that actually is happening in these first couple of chapters, you don't really pay off until later books. So it's very good detail that's set up here that is important stuff to pay attention to all the way around. I'm pretty interested in Italians running off and looking into things. I may actually write a short story about her disappearance here, because we don't have her perspective. We don't know what happened with her, and I'm kind of interested in doing that right now. So it could happen. Look for it on my Patreon. I put up short stories on my Patreon almost every month, and they're almost always Ruslandian stories, as I'm really building this world out into something really nice and complex and big and awesome. I'll put the link down in the description below. And if you're liking this story, make sure to pick up the newest book, The Iron Wedding, which is out now on Amazon. And if you're listening to this in 2019, we've got a Kickstarter for the hardcover editions. I'll put all of those links below. Thank you for tuning in. I hope the commentary was useful and interesting, and hope the read was fun for you, and that you'll continue along with the book. I'll talk to you guys soon.